Hi everyone, Charlie Pimarini here with MedCanna Today. My partner Stephanie, both physician associates here with the cause of promoting safe and effective use of cannabis and really promoting education. And we're really upset about this new JAMA article that was released. Not so much about the JAMA article, but more about Medscape's video and attempt to basically continue the stigma and the demonization of cannabis. JAMA published an article in February 13th of 2023 uh, titled Assessment of Orally Administered Delta 9 Tetrahydrocannabinol when co-administered with CBD on Delta 9, which is THC, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics in healthy adults, a randomized clinical trial. The title sounds really good. Sounds like a randomized controlled trial, which is the best type of trial that you can have in medicine, and you'd think it'd be a good article. And I think it has some benefits, and we'll talk about that. But let's play the video that this doctor from Medscape uses to kind of continue to demonize, what we're trying to do here in medicine. So let's play that for you.
Dispensary in Massachusetts a few years ago, mostly to see what the hype was about. There I am, knowing basically nothing about pot as the gentle strains. Acapulco Gold is buoyant and energizing. Purple Kush is sleepy, relaxed, dissociative. Here's a strain that makes you feel nostalgic. Here's one that helps you focus. It was as complicated and as oddly specific as a fancy wine tasting, and I had a feeling about as reliable. And while a strain that evokes memories of your first kiss is beyond the reach of modern cultivation practices, it is true that not all marijuana is created equal. It's a plant after all, and though Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, is the chemical responsible for its euphoric effects, it's far from the only substance in there. The second most important compound in cannabis is cannabidiol, CBD. And most people will tell you that CBD is the gentle yin to THC's paranoiac yang. Hence your local ganja barista reminding you that if you don't want all those anxiety-inducing side effects of THC, grab a strain with a nice CBD balance. But is it true? A new study appearing in JAMA Network Open suggests, in fact, that it's quite the opposite. We're talking about this study from Dr. Austin Zamaripa and colleagues who clearly sit at the researcher cool kid table. 18 adults who had abstained from marijuana use for at least a month participated in this trial, which is way more fun than anything we do at my lab at Yale. In random order, separated by at least a week, they ate some special brownies. Condition 1 was a control brownie. Condition 2, a brownie with 20 milligrams of THC. And condition 3, a brownie with 20 milligrams of THC and 640 milligrams of CBD. Participants were assigned each condition in random order, separated by at least a week. A side note on doses, for those of you who, like me, are not totally weed literate, 20 milligrams of THC is about a third of what you might find in a typical joint these days, though it's about double the THC content of a joint in the 70s. I believe the technical term is doobie. 640 milligrams of CBD is a decent dose, as 5 milligrams per kilogram is what some folks start with to achieve therapeutic effects. Both THC and CBD interact with the cytochrome P450 system in the liver. This matters when you're ingesting them instead of smoking them because you have first-pass metabolism to contend with. And because of that, P450 inhibition, it's possible that CBD might actually increase the amount of THC that gets into your bloodstream from the brownie or gummy or pizza sauce or whatever. Let's get to the results, starting with blood THC concentration. It's not subtle. With CBD on board, the THC concentration gets higher, faster, with roughly double the area under the curve. And unsurprisingly, the subjective experience correlated with those higher levels. Individuals rated the drug effect higher with the combo. Interestingly, the pleasant drug effect didn't change much, while the unpleasant effects were substantially higher. No mitigation of THC anxiety here, quite the opposite. CBD made the anxiety worse. Cognitive effects were equally profound. Scores on a digit symbol substitution test and a paste serial addition task were all substantially worse when CBD was mixed with THC. And for those of you who want some more objective measures, check out heart rate. Despite the purported calming nature of CBD, heart rates were way higher when individuals were exposed to both chemicals. Okay, the picture here is quite clear, though the mechanism is not. At least when talking edibles, CBD enhances the effect of THC, and not necessarily for the better. It may be that CBD is competing with some of the proteins that metabolize THC, prolonging its effects. CBD may also directly inhibit those enzymes. But whatever the case, I think we can safely say the myth that CBD makes the effects of THC more mild or more tolerable is busted. For Medscape, I'm Perry Wilson.
All right, so
I don't even know we're going to try and temper our reaction to this and respond as medical professionals, responding to another medical professional, Dr. Perry Wilson. Do you want to go first, Steph?
So I have a lot of things to say. But first, I guess the only good thing I could say is that at least we're advancing. We're having some research in cannabis. It's progress, right? But I feel like every time we take one step forward, we have cases like this, which bring us back to backwards. So first thing is it was a study of 18 participants. So this guy,
low-powered study.
Yeah, this guy is really making some strong statements off of a study of 18 people. I mean, I remember in school, to have a good valid study, it should have at least been over 1,000, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and for people that aren't familiar with research design, an N in a study means the amount of people that are in a study. An N of 18 is a very low powered study, right? If you're going to make claims like Dr. Perry Wilson did, and Medscape is obviously behind in saying that this shows definitively that CBD is not the calming partner THC, you would want a large swath of people in order to represent the entire population, and an N of 18 is nowhere near what you need. That wouldn't pass a clinical trial. This is more preliminary data anyway. So, sorry, continue.
No, it's okay. It just makes me sad that John Hopkins actually really moved through with this.
Right.
Because you have some physicians that, they're tired. They're just like browsing through news. They click on this and they're like, yeah, he's right. They don't have time to click or enough interest to click into the study, read it, and see what it really is about, which we did. And that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I think the biggest thing that you were one of the biggest things, there's a few limitations, and they even list some of the limitations. The way the study was designed is basically they took 18 individuals abstaining from cannabis for at least 30 days, and then they gave them a 3 different basically, I don't want to say drugs, but 3 different drugs. Basically, one was a placebo, and they had a brownie, and their placebo brownie had alcohol in it, which is metabolized by the same CYP450 enzyme. They then gave someone a brownie with 20 milligrams of THC, which, if anyone has ever used cannabis, 20 milligrams of THC in an edible is a fair amount, right? And then they gave somebody 20 milligrams of CBD, 20 milligrams of THC with 640 milligrams of CBD in a brownie, which is ungodly amount of CBD. I've never talked to anybody that's taken that much CBD in one dose because, one, it's extremely expensive, and 2, most people don't need that much. Most people are anywhere from 20 to 50 to maybe 100 milligrams per dose, or maybe a couple times a day. But that's an extremely high dose. So I think there's a lot of issues. And then what they basically did in order to study the effects on the CYP450, which is one of the enzymes, the main enzyme that our liver uses to break down drugs, toxins, medications, alcohol, anything that we put into our body. They used a mixture of in order to, because there's drugs that we know the byproduct and the breakdown, the rate of breaking down of these things through the liver, and so they put them together and they're able to kind of get a rough measurement of how the liver system is working if it's backed up through the CBD or THC. So they used 100 milligrams of caffeine because we know the half-life, the 20 milligrams of omeprazole, which is Prilosec, 25 milligrams of losartan, which is a blood pressure medication, 30 milligrams of dextromethorphan, which is a cough medicine, and 2 milligrams of midazolam, which is for SED, which is a benzodiazepine that we give to patients in procedure. It actually causes anterior amnesia. It doesn't allow you to form new memories. So you can get twilight sedation and not have to be fully put under. So these
that right
couple,
there, Charlie, sorry, that right there already increased my heart rate, and I'm just listening to you. Imagine taking that cocktail.
I had to stop reading because dextromethorphan, it has drowsiness and fatigue as part of its side effect, which already can be kind of coexistent with some of the THC products, right? But now we're putting alcohol into a control group that's already a drug. So I just don't understand why they just didn't do a regular brownie with nothing in it,
exactly.
Right? I don't know why they had to put alcohol into it. And then this mixture of cocktails that we already know is well established. There are thousands of papers showing CBD and THC go down CYP450, right? So why are you adding these drugs in there that already are going to alter some of the metabolism of THC and CBD? And if you look at the way the paper is, the primary goal in a study is what their endpoint is, what they're studying is. The primary goal of the study was to evaluate potential cannabinoid drug interactions with 5 established CYP450 drugs administered as an oral CYP450 cocktail. Okay. And the secondary goal was, and the focus of the present manuscript was to compare the pharmacokinetics and the pharmacodynamics, which is pharmacodynamics is the subjective drug effects, cognitive, psychomotor performance, and vital signs of a cannabis extract high in delta-9 THC and containing no CBD, and the various different kind of doses that they were talking about. But I mean, Steph, there's so many things to talk about here, but I just feel like this wasn't it wasn't a fair trial for Medscape to pick up and say that this is definitive. CBD is not the calming brother to THC. Off of 18 people, a flawed study, right? I mean, I have so many notes. I had to stop and go work out because I was getting so frustrated with this paper. And you know what are some other things that are kind of upsetting you about this?
So they did choose healthy participants. So it says 18 to 60 years of age, a BMI of 18 to 34. Another thing is that they made sure that the participants did not use cannabis for 30 days prior to their first session of the study. So going back to the dosaging, for someone who's maybe, I don't know if they were chronic users or not frequent users. I think they mentioned in the study that most of them were not frequent users. So why would you start with a dose of 20 milligrams THC and 640 milligrams of CBD? I mean, anyone would have a negative reaction to that.
Huge. And that's sad because when you ingest an edible of THC, the byproduct breakdown, the delta 11 hydroxy part of THC is actually more psychoactive, right? You have more of a psychological high when you eat an edible versus if you smoke. And so, and like you said, so chronic users have a downregulation of the CB1 and CB2 receptors, and that's why it's almost, you need to take more to get higher to have the same therapeutic benefit. So, that's like someone going to say,
a little better.
Right. Oh yeah. It's, someone that's never drank before, you say, hey, take these, 6 shots of vodka and let me know how you feel. Yeah, of course you're going to fail a cognitive exam because you're drunk.
Another issue I had was that they made them have a low-fat breakfast prior to the study.
Oh boy.
So you're already, like, for anyone who's been studying cannabis, knows that you actually want the opposite, a high-fat diet, right? If you want to make it as positive as you can. So how do you feel about that?
I feel like that's another disservice, right? And THC is fat soluble. Or anyone that's ever made an edible, you've got to cook THC, render it down like in a butter, because it is fat soluble, and so that's the best way for absorption. So they're already kind of behind the eight ball. Again, I don't know what's a low fat diet to them, and what do they make them eat, but I think that just kind of, and what really upsets me about this, another thing that upsets me about the study is I looked at some of the lead researchers, and they actually had taken money from, let's see, it says the researchers that did take money took money from previous cannabis projects for Canopy Therapeutic, which is a cannabis researching arm of the cannabis business, right? They use money to funnel into research in order to get more therapeutic products, to get more of a generalized approach to these things. And these people have used this money for cannabis research in the past. So what upsets me is I feel like they would have kind of had a better study design than this. But they even limit in their limitations. They say that although no adverse effects were noted with the CYP 450 cocktail was administered after placebo brownie, the CYP 450 cocktail may have contributed to the behavioral outcomes observed during the active cannabis conditions. So what they're saying is they can't delineate the cocktail that they gave them versus this THC CBD side effects, right? And most people that I know would never eat a 20 milligram brownie with a 640 milligrams of CBD in it. That just doesn't happen, right? And the best way to consume cannabis is the whole plant, right? The plant in itself with all the terpenes, the flavonoids, all the polyphenols, all these things. So, there's just a lot of things that are wrong with this study. And Johns Hopkins took it up, which is really, really unfortunate. But I'm more upset about Medscape, a big brand, right, that a lot of medical professionals trust for their news.
Yeah.
And they take this story and just really, you can hear in his language, ganja, just really kind of just demoralizing, continue to undercut
this myth. He says
right?
this CBD myth.
Right. And so I went to talk to your local ganja dispenser, right? Like, all right, man, I get it. You may not like it. You don't have to like it. And we're not here, and we have never once said, and we never will say, cannabis is for everybody. Cannabis is for specific people that want to try it. And we're here advocating for the appropriate patient with the appropriate dose at the appropriate time.
Right.
And
exactly.
This really just undercuts it, because anecdotally, I've seen so many patients, so have you, coming back and getting amazing benefits from cannabis and CBD products. So that's what's so upsetting about this. And I think, until people like you and I and this movement that we're trying to start here really get a hold, I think it's just going to continue.
Because
what are your thoughts?
Have providers, clinicians that are against it, because they grew up in a time where they were told it was bad, it causes psychosis, all these negative myths. Those are myths, right?
Right. Right.
So it's going to be very hard to get them to believing it or believing in cannabis until they have their own patients coming back and saying, hey, look, like it really did work. I told you about my grandma the other day, 82 years old, arthritis. I gave her full spectrum CBD 3 days and she was already feeling better. She's like, I don't know what it is. And I'm like, I know exactly what it is.
I mean,
but,
it's sad.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Yeah, and I gave her microdose. If I would have given her 640 milligrams of CBD,
that's so much. That's too much.
She would have been knocked out all day.
Most people start at 5 to 10 to 15 milligrams of CBD, right? 640 milligrams, not only is the cost, huge, but the side effects. And I think the study design, like if they're trying to,
maybe that's why they needed Johns Hopkins, so that they could afford 640 milligrams for 18 people.
Maybe that's why they gave him Versed. I mean, I think the problem is you're trying to ascertain the effects of two medications. When I'm going to say medications, THC and CBD, on the metabolism through the CYP 450. But then you're giving all these other medications. Yes, I understand they have known, a breakdown. We know the metabolism profile of these medications, but do we really know how they interact with these two other medications, CBD and THC, that are still being studied, right? We really don't, especially at these doses. There's very little studies that are showing any research for 640 milligrams of CBD. I find that hard to believe, but you know, I think, our goal and my goal, and, I'll full transparency. I don't use cannabis. I don't use marijuana. I use cannabis in the sense of I use hemp. I use full spectrum CBD products, but I don't use marijuana, and that's just not my thing. But I 100% advocate for my patients, for my friends, and for my family to use it if they find benefit into it, right? And I help them out, but it's not for everybody. And I think continually hammering this in that it's not, it's ganja, you're going to go to your local smoke shop and you're going to get so high. Yes. And that's what our goal is, right? It's in order to educate people to go to the smoke shop, to go to the dispensary and be armed with education in order to learn how to ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What questions are they supposed to ask? Like arming them with a dispensary, playbook.
Mm-hmm.
There's whole books written about cannabis. It used to be prescribed in the 1920s, 30s, fifth turn of the century. Doctors would write prescriptions for it. It was readily available in pharmacies.
They used it
I think it's just,
for labor back in the days.
100%, right? Back in the whenever I can't remember whichever king went and found how it was actually in India. That's why some of these strains are named. A lot of these Afghan strains are named for that because that's where they originally came from.
Yep.
And they're finding it was helping with women's menstrual cramps and birth pains, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's medicinal benefits. It's just sad that it's going to continue to get crapped on. Yet it's okay for us to write fentanyl and oxy and all of these highly addictive medications.
I don't get it. So another thing that I wanted to point out is that in those 640 milligrams of CBD, for those who received the CBD dominant brownie, that extract didn't actually just have CBD. It had 59.3% of CBD, 2.1% of CBC, 2.0% of Delta 9, 1.1% of CBG, less than 1% of CBN, THCV, and Delta 8 THC. So that's another issue that I have with this study because you're not really giving clear, like,
it's not an isomer. It's not an extract.
you have like how many cannabinoids did I mention here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cannabinoids. So you can't really conclude the relationship with CBD to THC after all of these other cannabinoids have been included.
Right, because it's well known, it's well established. There's research about each one of these cannabinoids, CBG, THCV, all have differing CBN, all having different psychological side effects just on their own, right? If you just take them by themselves. And that's why I think me and you've talked about this, that it's so hard to study the cannabis plant because even if you try and just take out one molecule like THC, like Dronabinol, and they try to do that therapeutic, right? Just a high dose THC isomer that binds just to CB1, no other medications. Very little people are taking that because the side effects are too high. The plant was made to consume with everything together, right? That's why the entourage effect is so powerful, and that's why the plant, just in its most natural, natural properties, is the best way to consume it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What else, Steph? Hit him with something else.
Yeah, let's see. Let me go to my notes. I was writing some stuff down last night. I was like, I need to talk to Charlie. What is this? Let's see. What else did I see? We already talked about that. So I guess let's talk about the conclusion, right? They did mention that there are some limitations. Their first limitation.
Talked about the limitations.
Yeah, so one, I don't know if you mentioned this, that they didn't do one of just CBD, right? So they did a placebo one, which is it really a placebo if it has alcohol? No. A THC and CBD, right?
Right. Yep.
And they didn't do one that was just CBD. So
Which is weird.
Exactly. The whole thing is weird. Like you said earlier, it's just shady. It's shady.
Shady, but that's a point I want to make is until we get more legitimized, a whole consensus of the medical community behind this, who funds the research? It's the pharmaceutical companies, right? They're the ones that fund most of the research. The NIH does fund some too, but the pharmaceutical companies fund the research in order because they know they're going to get an ROI on it by using a drug that's patented for 20, 30 years, after it. So until the pharmaceutical companies see that they're not going to get arrested or there's still a market for this, they're not going to fund all these big research papers and articles. But the little secret is the federal government owns patents on CBD, and they've owned patents on CBD for decades, right? And the pharmaceutical companies own patents on THC and cannabis and CBD for specific applications, neuroprotective, anti-inflammatory. You can Google it. You can look up the U.S. patents. So they obviously know it works, but they aren't allowing everyone to kind of do this research and to explore in this because they're trying to just, prop up other industries. And so I think that's a shame.
It really is. It's sad. I mean, it's coming. It's taking a long time, though. Seems like psychedelics is moving forward quicker than cannabis. But
right.
Hey, some progress is better than none. So
no, yeah.
I just saw this. So they're stating that the participants that took the CYP cocktail with Delta-9 THC and CBD increased so they self-reported increased anxiety, sedation, memory difficulty, increased heart rate, and it produced a more pronounced impairment of cognitive and psychomotor performance compared to those with just the cocktail and THC or the cocktail with the placebo. Again.
I mean, and I think, but that's actually an important point, I think. When I talk with patients, and I'm sure you do the same thing, is when you tell them, listen, CBD can interact with other medications, right? It's well known St. John's wort can interact with a lot of psych meds. So you really caution patients. It should be the same thing around CBD. Like, hey, if you're taking some of these meds, especially like blood thinners, anti-seizure medications, anti-arrhythmic medications, you really should check with your providers that are prescribing those to make sure that they understand that you are taking other medication that potentially has some interactions. It's just to keep a little bit eye on it. But it just proves that point. I think the study design was pretty flawed. And I think the fact that Medscape took 18 patients with the study design and ran with it, and Dr. Perry Wilson said, it just proves the point that ganja is, the enemy. Come on, man, wake up. It's 2023, bro. The fact that we're having psilocybin being passed, in a lot of states, ketamine's being used, these things that have been known for years and kind of the fringe, quote unquote, fringe medical societies, is becoming more mainstream. It's just cannabis is going to be probably one of the last ones just because it's been a hill to die on for so many people, but it's not going to happen forever. So.
All right. Well, I mean, anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that's it. Where can
we'll be jumping on weekly, discussing a new article every week, dissecting it. We're open to comments if anyone wants to join or has an article that they want us to discuss or talk about. Please reach out to us. We're here.
Yep. We ain't going anywhere. MedCannaToday.com. There's a portion where you can contact us for a submission for guest lectures. We're going to bring on some guest lectures at some point, some guest interviews. We want to hear patient stories. We want to hear everything, the good, the and the bad. Because this doesn't go without. There's good and bad to this, like with any medication. So, please reach out, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and so please follow, subscribe to the podcast. And if you have questions, please reach out. Info at MedCanna Today or MedCannaToday.com. So I think that's it, Steph.
Thank you, Charlie. Bye.